Hello and welcome to another cup of coffee with me, Sandy. Today I have got one of my oldest friends on the coast, and everybody knows him. He is the foodie, he is the wine man, he knows everything about restaurants, and his name is Garry Waite, and everybody knows him not only on the coast but also in the UK. Morning, Garry, how are you?
Morning, Sandy. Well, after that intro, I better live up to that, hadn't I?
Well, after the life you've had, I know that you're definitely going to. You're not going to disappoint us at all because you've got stories that come from way, way back. And I'm actually going to, I don't know how many people know really about your background. So I'm going to start right at the beginning. When you were a young lad, probably about 10 or 12 years old, and you started a summer job at the Grand Spa Hotel in Bristol, correct?
I was a bit older than that. I was 14.
Oh,
Um, well, the only reason being that in those days, you had, well, actually, I was a bit younger than that, but you had to be 14 to work. I think I was about 13 and a half or something. But it's only because I spent years being at the home and, mum and dad throw a cocktail party and I'd be there dishing out the booze or carrying the food around or something like that. And I was sitting outside with my mother one day, just on a summer holidays coming up and saying I wanted to do some work or get some income in for the summer holiday. And she said, well, why don't you go to a hotel and work in a hotel? And I said, oh, I don't know if I could do that. And she said, well, you start at the bottom. So I went along, strangely enough, to the Grand Spa Hotel, which is miles from where I lived, and I used to have to be there for breakfast. So I had to be there for 6:30 in the morning, which meant the 5:45 bus from where I lived to get there in time to start work. And as I say, only a youngster, so I mean, I was making all these things, and of course, I didn't leave there until around about 9 o'clock at night because I wasn't allowed to stay on anyway, because again, it would be too many hours.
sure.
Um, and I just started. I just liked the lifestyle. I just liked not my lifestyle, but the lifestyle of the people that were going in there. I mean, that was the thing, fine frocks and nice wines and chandeliers and candles, and it just looks so nice, and the old pianist in the corner giving it this. It was,
All
I
the
just fell in love with it.
elegance, all the elegance. So
Oh, really?
when you were so young and you were doing that job, did guests actually see you or were you only in the kitchen?
Oh no, no, no. I was at front of house. I was a waiter. Yeah.
You was
We used to
awake.
have to line up in the mornings with our fingers and
Did
make sure
they
the
check your
nails
hands
were
to see that your
clean,
nails
yeah,
were clean
and
and
a
all
clean
that?
handkerchief. Always have a clean handkerchief and always have a fountain pen, because
Oh,
in those days, gentlemen didn't use biros. So if they had to
no,
sign a bill or a check, you'd give them your fountain pen, not a biro, so or a ballpoint or whatever.
in those
No, I
days,
was definitely at the front.
in those days of the elegance and the finery of the hotel, did you meet or see any celebrities that you
Well, of course, it wasn't.
recognized?
I mean, in those years, it wasn't really a celebrity culture like there is today.
No.
The only person I really remember seeing was Cary Grant, and
Ah,
that's well, his mother was in a nursing home in Clifton, because you probably know he was born in Bristol. So
yes, yes.
yeah, so his mother was in a nursing home in Bristol, and he used to come over. But the funny thing was, the thing that he missed most about Los Angeles, or California in general, I suppose, was the stuff that he couldn't get. Like we were first when we came over to Spain, you couldn't get your PG tips, or you couldn't get this sort of thing. And the thing that he couldn't get was baked beans and pork sausages.
No way.
Uh, yeah, they can get not what
But
we would
that's
call
what he
proper pork
liked.
sausage. They get deli type stuff,
Yeah.
in the Jewish delis and things, but he couldn't get good old English bowyer's sausages. So we used to have to cook him beans and sausages. But of course, in those days, when we delivered it, it came out on a silver cloche.
Yeah.
So it would go down in front of him like that, and then it would be lifted up, and then it had his
Sure.
sausage and beans and eat those. So, but that's about the only guy I can remember seeing. A lot of course, business people used it a lot for entertainment.
Sure. It's strange because when I was going to New York once a month in my heyday, I stayed at the Warwick Hotel in New York, and Cary Grant had a penthouse that he kept there. And on several occasions when I was there, I was invited up to have drinks with him. So it's a strange connection between the two of us, which I didn't even know about.
No
I
idea.
didn't know about either. Okay, and you finished school, and you decided you were going to stay on as in the hotel industry.
Well, yeah, I think my mother wanted me to be a doctor or gynecologist or something. I don't know it's gynecologist because my middle name is Hamilton, and that was named after my mother's gynecologist. So I thought, well, I'll be struck off. I'd be no good. I couldn't do that.
You're just very lucky she didn't call you Goldfinger.
So the other thing that I wouldn't have minded doing was a barrister.
Okay.
But the problem with being a barrister, it took a lot of hard work and education and studying, most of which I tried to avoid as much as possible. But of course, it took on a different sort of hard work. But I really wanted to be an actor. And I suppose the thing was so much time playing barristers like Perry Mason and all that sort of stuff. I thought that's sort of be the same thing, really. You know, you have to get into court and do that. When I realized it would be hard work. And then, of course, I went for an interview from Queen Elizabeth's Hospital School, which is, I was there, public school. And a few of us went up to RADA for just for a chat, not an interview, just a chat. And the principal of RADA was telling us all, you do realize that for every Michael Caine and Sir Laurence Olivier, there are 1,000 actors out of work. And I thought, yeah, that's the thing. Maybe not. So I knocked that on the head for the time being, although I carried on an amateur basis anyway. And thought, well, I'll do what I really enjoy doing, which is hotels, which quite honestly is a stage. It's still the same sort of thing.
For you, it's always been a stage. Because,
oh, yes, always.
In the times that I know you, which we will come to later, you performed as well as host, the hostess with the mostest. But
yeah.
You opened up your own first restaurant. And that to me was very strange because it was on a Spanish theme. And I wondered why.
Well, I'd been to Spain quite a few times by then. In fact, the first time I came to Spain was with my parents when I was 9. And we stayed in Palafrugell near Costa Blanca, Costa Brava, rather. And so I came then, and then I came over to Marbella when I was 18. And then after that, I tended to go to Tenerife, which had started to become very popular. And so I went to Tenerife a lot. My parents used to go far more than I did, but still to Spain in the mainland. And then when I came across this place, it was called the Little House Restaurant in Bleeden, which is just outside of Weston-super-Mare. It was just a lovely old country cottage. And it was my mother said, oh, we should call it La Casita. That's Spanish, you know. And I thought, that's a good idea, Mother. So we called it La Casita. But I did, as I say in my book, I didn't even know at that time what huevos a la flamenco was because I'd never eaten them in Spain. You know, I'm probably still going to tourist places and eating garlic, mayonnaise, and chicken and chips. But so I didn't know much about Spanish food, but it gave me a great opportunity to learn about it. And then I gave it all my own sort of twists. I mean, one of the most outrageous dishes I probably did was a hare in chocolate sauce, which was a Spanish dish. Yeah, and I used to do, but I couldn't put hare in chocolate sauce on the menu because, as you say, in those days nobody would have eaten it.
No.
So no. Hare in a rich red wine sauce, and of course, what was that? Was so good, you know, chocolate, you know. No,
you were very much ahead of your time as far as putting chocolate in a recipe because
most
in the last, I would say, 10 years, if that, chocolate is now accepted in a recipe.
Well, in fairness, as I say, in Spain, it had been going for many, many years. Chocolate, they used to do partridge as well in chocolate sauce. And of course, the Mexicans have cooked with chocolate for years.
Yes.
So it was a little bit creative at the time, but so was a lot of the other dishes we did because I just like taking things and changing the way they looked. So as they became, I mean, not like it is now, but certainly in 1976, it was a very unusual way of preparing and cooking food, especially with a Spanish twist to it.
Your father helped you. Was he front of house?
Oh, bless his heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, he used to, because the deal was, obviously, we bought the restaurant and Dad was the only one that had the wherewithal to buy it. And the idea was that they would stay in the restaurant because we had accommodation with it until I was on my feet, that I could buy the restaurant from him. And then they could move into another new house somewhere, which is what we did. So my father worked in Bristol, and it took, can't remember, probably about 35, 40 minutes before he could get to work. And he often used to come back at lunchtime as well. And then he would go back to work, and then he would come back in the evening, and then he'd work at the front of house, taking the orders and looking after people, because he was a bonhomie as well. And then he'd probably get to bed about 1 o'clock or something, and then he'd be up again at 6 to go to work. So he did that for quite some time, until I said, you can't do this anymore, you know, it's too much. And so I got a couple of people on the front of house and alleviated that problem, and then eventually bought them out, and they moved into another house in Sandford, which is about half an hour away.
Your father also told you something. Do you recall what he told you?
Well, he told me a lot of things. A couple of things
one thing that he told you.
Yeah, well, the two things that are important, and I've got them in the book, and that is, never worry about anything you can't do anything about,
Right.
which I think is good. But on the opening day of the restaurant, we had about, well, we were full, and it was pretty stressful because I went in the kitchen, and you know, I've never pretended to be a great chef. I love consuming it, and I know how it should be done, but I've never been a chef. I worked with a friend of mine called Neil Ramsey, no relation to Gordon, for 6 weeks or so before I opened it, to work with him in his restaurant, just to get the feel of how to do it. So Dad came into the kitchen, and we're already outside, and I went outside to make sure the table was done and everything. My sister and my mother were at the front of the house, and I said, "You look a bit concerned, Pop. Are you a bit worried about my capabilities?" And he said, "Not your capability, your copability." And it stuck with me forever, because you can have the most capable person, but if they can't cope with it,
can you cope? And I've
numbers,
got a feeling that in all the restaurants that you've opened, which you will go through, you shared that with your staff in every place, because that stuck with you, and it's with you to this day.
It's a mantra, yeah. I especially in the kitchens, yes. Because chefs like to, especially nowadays, they like to be very artistic, yes. Which is great. I mean, that's, you know, that's what it's all about. As I said, it's something I tried to do sort of all my career. But it's, you know, if you can do it that way for 10 people, great. But what happens if it's 50? You know, you're capable of doing it, but can you cope with the numbers? So I've maintained that capability and copability are two different things. Yeah.
You also opened another restaurant, which was an old 11th century.
Yeah, 11th century castle.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Bristol, I sold La Casita in 1980. Somebody wanted to buy it, and I went into Bristol, and I had a consultancy company. We were the first people to do videos for properties, and Christie encoded it 6 months after we did, and I got a retraction from them in the catering hotel key, because they had said they were the first, and we were the first, but we were only a poxy little place. But I was doing that, and then the Bristol Council were looking for someone to take over the old castle vaults, which were 11th century. In fairness, it was only the keep that was left. I mean, the castle had been destroyed hundreds of years ago, but the keep had remained for forever. And at the time I went to see it, it was being used as a storeroom for the gardeners, for all the machinery. And they were so keen to have somebody open it and everything else, and they gave me a lot of help and finance and everything. And so I opened that. And
there you brought your food into the area of Nouveau Cuisine?
Well, we went a step up. I mean, a couple of things we did there. We did tapas, which nobody had done tapas in the early 80s. I mean, you know, some of the famous tapa restaurants that exist nowadays weren't around then. And I was also very naughty because I never obeyed the licensing laws. It's a bit late now if anybody's listening from Bristol City Council. We served.
Get you, Garry. They're coming to get you.
There'll be a queue. Yeah, we served drinks all day with food. I mean, well, that's not true. We served drink to anybody who wanted it, really. But we concentrated on the food side. So we did tapas, and we went a little bit more on the modern style. I don't like the word nouvelle, although nouvelle was what it was called. But, you know, I was a bit more substantial than nouvelle. People came and they could eat. Although I did have complaints sometimes that people went home and had a burger on the way. But
well, nouvelle came in at a time when, in fact, to my knowledge, was brought into the UK by my very close friends, which were the Roux brothers. And we just recently lost both of them. Yes, and they brought in Nouveau Cuisine because I used to eat the Gavroche very often and also the Waterside Inn. And that's how I remember that term coming in. And the small portions, which actually suited me very well because I've never been a big eater.
No, I mean, actually, the people, the Roux brothers worked with Trois, who was the original man. And they were disciples of his. And he also brought in Cuisine Minceur, which was even a smaller portion. But it's funny you should say bringing those into the ring, because when we did Funky Tapas here, all we were doing was fine dining.
Later.
Fine dining in small portions. So it was like having a menu degustation. You could sit and have 5 or 6 dishes. So it was a similar thing to a menu degustation, but about 1/10 of the price. But yeah, so that we did similar things at the restaurant, the Castle Park in Bristol.
Okay, you came down to Marbella. You came down to the coast, and I'm sure that you love the scenery, the food, the wine, and then you decided maybe this is where you would like to be.
Yeah, a mate of mine who I met, who was a good friend now, I didn't know him at the time, but I went to a property exhibition. And my girlfriend at the time said to me, why are we going to the Esso Motel, which was about 40 miles away? She said, they have property exhibitions at the Holiday Inn next door to the restaurant every week. Why are we going all the way? I said, I don't know, just got a funny feeling. We'll go out there, we'll have a bit of lunch, and then it'll be a day out and what have you. So I went up there, and I was expecting this big, huge property exhibition. And I walked into the reception, and nothing there at all. And I said, you've got a property exhibition? And he said, oh, yeah, downstairs on the right-hand side, there's a room. So I went down into this room with a desk and a couple of girls in it. And I said, is this the property exhibition for Spain? And she said, oh, yes, come this way. There's all these pictures. And I said, well, actually, I don't want that. I want a business. Oh, she said, we're not doing businesses. But when Barry comes down, you can he'll tell you all about it. So this is where I met Barry. And then after a long conversation, he said, well, why don't you come over and have a look around and I'll show you some places. He said, where did you want? That was it. And I said, well, I thought Puerto Banús, something like that. And he said, no. You want Friendly Fuengi or somewhere like that. You don't want to go into places like Banús. Well, I couldn't have afforded it anyway. So that's what happened. So I came over, and then I just thought, yeah, I could do this. So I moved over following year.
But were you not offered a job here, which didn't materialize?
That's a Transient Life. Michael Knox Johnston, who is Robin Knox Johnston's brother. Well, I met Michael at the Don Carlos Hotel in '85. And I told him I was coming over and I was looking for a job. So he said, well, your background, etc. And he said, we're looking for a director of food and beverage to start in January. And I thought, that's perfect. So long discussions, walked around the hotel, met chef, shook hands, everything else. Off I went. And then I came over on January. I came over with a pal. And after about 5 days here, I said, look, I better go down to the Don Carlos and just make sure about this job. So I went down to the Don Carlos. I went in and I said, can I speak to Michael Knox Johnston? And they said, who? And I said, Michael Knox Johnston, he was your general manager. And she said, oh, he left last year. oh, I said, well, I've got a job to start in January. And she said, just a minute. So this voice, this bloke comes down and said, good grief, Garry Waite, what on earth are you doing here? And there's a guy called Stan Smith, who I used to work with Canopy Foster, the accountants, you know, and I came down and I thought, what are you doing here? Anyway, he'd taken over the direction of the company, but there was no job for me. So I realized how transient everybody was. And then about 10, no, a bit more than that, about 20 years later, maybe a little less, Michael Knox Johnston was working at the La Cala Golf Resort as general manager. So I went up there and I said to the secretary, can I speak to Michael Knox Johnston? And she said, who's calling? I said, well, don't tell her who it is, just let me go in. So she let me go in and I said, hi. And I said, I've come for the job. And he said, what job? And I said, the job that you gave me in 1985 at Don Carlos. I've been looking for you ever since.
I was just having a sip of coffee, and when you said that, I nearly choked on it. Okay, so you were down here, you suddenly had no job. What did you then do? Do you remember?
I had about $3,000 with me. I think that was my total amount.
That was a lot in those days. Come on.
Certainly enough to live in Spain for a year.
Sure.
You know, it wasn't that bad at all. And I got to know through Barry, I got to know loads of different people.
Now, Barry, you talk about, that is the lovely Barry Nathan, I assume. Okay.
Yeah, and he introduced me to Manolo, I think his name was, who used to have the Max's discotheque in Fuengirola, which was where we all went, nightclub. And he got me introduced to this Spanish guy, lovely guy, who had a restaurant in Fuengirola, and they wanted to revamp everything and aim for an international market. But these guys were from Avila in the north, and that's how the food they were doing was a bit too, for Fuengirola especially, it was a little bit too Spanish. And they wanted to appeal to the tourists and everything else. So I changed the menus and did the work. So I worked with them for 9 months, I think. And then I ended up going to the Oceana Hotel. Oh, sorry, Oceana Beach Club, as it was, in 1987, I think. And then after that, it just
started to change your life, because you were with the Oceana, and then you've opened many.
Mediterranea was being built next door,
right?
And the company that was running it was a company called Electrolux Hotel Management Services, and that's where I first, well, second time I met Mark Wardell, who became a great mate of mine, and they were running it, and they wanted me to take on the general manager's job of the club, which didn't please the Rileys too much, because of course it meant that all the members from Oceana, once I left Oceana, it tended to dip a bit. So when I opened Mediterranea some 6 months later, you know, we had an influx of members from Oceana to join to join Mediterranea. Then after that, the Golf Club Marbella, which fabulous job that was.
That was a wonderful, wonderful venue. And I remember having so many wonderful lunches there with you.
Yeah, really. You know, that was one of my favorite places. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then really, in between, like an actor out of work, when I wasn't doing a project, which they all paid me reasonably well to do, I'd open a restaurant and find a little place somewhere and do something with it, rather than sit on my backside doing nothing.
Give me an idea of the various restaurants that you have opened. I know the other one that I went to, which was magnificent, was Tikitana.
Yeah, that wasn't mine. That was a company project.
That was a project, but you were there. And if my memory is correct, that's where your wonderful trolley, your carving trolley, and
carving trolley was the Guadalupean in Banús. And
okay.
That was 2000 and.
Oh, don't worry about the year.
Yeah, 2008. Yeah.
But that trolley has followed you. I mean, it's Garry with the trolley.
That's right. Have trolley will travel.
Absolutely.
Like a trolley dolly, dear.
That trolley dolly. And you didn't even have a trolley dolly uniform, but you were serving, and you still carve. When asked, you still have the trolley, you still have that, and it's always pristine. And there you lift up the lid, and there is that wonderful piece of meat which you then start carving at the table. And that, even in the 21st century, is still a showpiece. And that's
Oh,
where
yes.
the showman of you comes in, because you are a showman. You went to Radi, you spoke with them, but then you have acted here on the coast.
Done a bit.
And you've done supper theatre here on the coast as well.
Very
So
popular.
very popular. So you have really, you've had the best of both worlds, because you've been the foodie, you've been the wine man, you've been in that area, culinary, but you've also integrated with theatre.
Yeah.
And that has made you very special, because I don't know of any other restaurateurs who have got that sort of
I'd have to say my friend Francis Butler would be the nearest.
Of course, yes, I forgot about Francis. Yes, he was totally different to you. He was, he had the elegance.
Thank you.
You had the charm. He had the elegance, you had the charm, and you've still got the charm. And Francis, who is now still doing some radio work, he still comes across with elegance.
Yeah, he's a boisterous character, to say the least.
He's a character, as you are.
But it was like the Odd Couple, really, because I first met him when he had just bought the Finca Bisaya. Yeah, and he was just having friends round, really. And he would cook in the kitchen, and then they'd all come. Nobody'd ever pay. They'd all get drunk, and they'd all have a wonderful time. And of course, then Francis was realizing that he ought to try and make this a serious business. So I went over, and I went in the kitchen with him. Well, he went out the front, and I said, "Look, you go out the front. That's where everybody wants you to be, and I'll do what I can in the kitchen to sort of maintain a standard and make a profit." So I was with him for quite some months, and then I developed hepatitis. And from shellfish poisoning, I got Chloe and I ate oysters, and we weren't ill with them, like throwing up or anything. It just developed the hepatitis gene. So I was out of work. I couldn't do anything for about 3 months. I was floored. So when I got back, France had gone back in the kitchen, and that was it. So I didn't go back there.
You've also, I recall, going to La Reserva, which was a lovely, lovely restaurant.
Yeah, La Reserva was one of mine. That was my own place.
Yes.
Which I took on after the Golf Club Marbella. After the Golf Club Marbella, I went to the Marbella Club in Puente Romana for a year.
Yes.
And then I left after the year's contract. And then I was assistant to the managing director there, German guy. And then I left there, and I went and opened La Reserva de Marbella. And I was there for 4 years.
And that was in Alveria, right?
Well, La Reserva de Marbella itself, which is near
Capapino. It was east of Marbella.
That's right, yeah. And then I was asked to take on the Oceana Hotel and Beach Club.
And
during the time I was there, I did Daphne's as well.
I remember Daphne's. Do you remember that we did a charity party for Kudeka there?
Well, we did quite a few things like that. I can't remember. Actually, yes, I do remember that, because we were in the main room with the roof. Yeah.
Morris Boland dressed up as a female, and I'm the only one that has still got the video of that complete opening.
Good God.
We go back a long time, Garry Waite, you and I.
I was thinking more of the image of Morris Boland in drag. I don't know.
Well, he raised a lot of money, which he has done for Kudeka and for many other charities on the coast. And
I did the first commercial gig for Kudeka in the theatre, where we did Gypsy. Really? And that was with Jackie Travis and Chloe Franks, me, Maury, Phil Taylor's husband, and a beautiful girl whose name I cannot remember. If she ever sees this, I apologize. who played Gypsy Rose Lee. And I can't remember how much we made. I think we made 500,000 pesetas. And that was the first money that went into the pot to Kudeka.
Well, I recall when Kudeka was still under construction, Morris, Joan Hunt, Marissa, myself were standing there, and I took the photograph of the Kudeka, and that photograph is now used on the roof of Kudeka.
All right.
Yeah. And so our lives have all, on the coast, the people that have been here a long time have all intertwined. But then let's go back to a wonderful restaurant that you opened in Nueva Andalucía, La Campana.
Yes, that was after somebody came along and bought Guadalupin from me. It was very strange because I had a phone call from a lawyer, an Argentinian lawyer, and he said, I understand your restaurant's for sale. And I went, oh, not really. I said, I'm sort of subletting it if I can. And he said, well, we would like to take over the lease. And I said, how much do you want for it? And I said, well, I don't really have anything to sell. Just a bit of goodwill, really. And he said, well, you've got the key. Oh, that was the owners of the company then came back, IFOS, and the managing director said, you've got the key. So these guys want it, sell them the key. So I said, how much do you want to pay for the key? And they did. So I moved out of there and I opened this little place, Campana, which I loved. I thought it was a super little place.
Oh,
and I was there till 2016, I think.
Yeah, magic. And then you opened, which I feel was the piece de resistance that you have ever done on this coast, Funky Tapa.
Yeah.
Funky Tapa was, except for one restaurant in Puerto Banús, and I'm not even going to mention the name, you would, in front of Funky Tapa, there would be lines of people waiting to go in. And that doesn't usually happen on this coast in a restaurant.
Yeah.
And
yeah, we were very fortunate.
It really was that special.
I must admit, it's something that I'm most proud of. Again, not just me. I mean, the team that put it together. I mean, Maurice was my head chef at La Campana, and he obviously did the menus and everything with me for there. And the great advantage we had, which I don't think would have worked otherwise, is we had La Campana's kitchens, because the kitchens we had at Funky Tapas were no bigger than a postage stamp. It was just a dispense kitchen. So all the work and all the preparation was being done down there. Because, I mean, in those days, I mean, we didn't just make, like 20 cottage pies or whatever we would be making. We were bulking it up constantly, because as fast as we were making it, we were selling it. I mean, they used to come in at 12 o'clock in the morning. We didn't even open till 1, but by 12 o'clock they were there waiting for the chefs to come into the kitchens and start serving. Yeah. And it just went on all day. It really was quite a phenomenon.
It was the most, in my book, it was the most special place that you opened. Then you moved to another area for Funky Tapa.
Yeah, what happened was I got a bit stitched up in Nueva Andalucía, which I won't go into, but basically to do with...
You had to move.
I had to move. I was pushed out, basically. There was jealousy or controversy. I have no idea. And then I went. I opened Oak for Ian Radford at the Salad. They were opening this restaurant, and they wanted to know if I'd be interested, which I would love to do, which I did. And during the time there, this guy who I knew as a client at Funky came, and he said, "Are you ever going to open Funky Tapas again?" And I said, "If somebody can come up with the right site, the right price, and the right backing, yes, I'd love to." So about a year later, he said he still wanted to do this. He said, "I've got this site down in Nueva Andalucía," which I knew because I looked at it as well, but at the time they wanted far too much money for it. So we went in together on doing that, which once again, can't remember who it said, but partnership's the only vessel that never sails. And, and unfortunately I got stitched up there. So.
And talking about sailing, you actually worked on cruise ships as well.
Oh yes, yeah, well, that should be obligatory for every young-blooded man from the age of 18 to 30. If you can't put on a if you can't put on a cruise liner, you're never going to do anything.
Show me a man that hasn't pulled on a cruise liner, and
Exactly.
I want to meet him, because I've made many cruises in my life, and it's a man's paradise, because there are always so many women, from young to old. It makes no difference of age. It's just female, and the hormones are just raising. We won't go into that.
No, but if you want more detail, read the book, because it's all in that.
That's exactly where I'm coming to. You're ahead of me, but we're on the same page.
Yes.
So you have been hotelier, restaurateur, actor. You cruised on the waves. You had consultancy business. You have done so much in your life, that you're also a great writer, as well as a great raconteur. And I read, it was some years ago, a book that you wrote called The Warm War. And I see of late you have reissued The Warm War, which is now being sold on Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done some private signings as well last year, but we redid it again on 2019. So.
Okay. And there is another book that you have written, which is also on Amazon, and that's Half My Life. Tell me about Half My Life.
Well,
or have you already told me about half your life?
No, there's a lot more in it than that. Half My Life is a strange thing, because I don't like to use the word autobiography, because that sounds terribly grandiose, and it's really left for people who've really done something with their lives. Mine is just I raconte like I write, or I write like I raconte. It's just as things came to me in memory. I happen to have a very good memory. And my idea was to write about half my life, which I have now lived in Spain half my life. So the idea was to write about my life in Spain since I arrived in '86. But I realized actually I had not a bad first half either. So the more I thought about it, I thought, well, let's write it half my life, and it's in two halves. It's before I came to Spain and afterwards. And the more I wrote about it, the more interested in it I became, because I started remembering other things. And I'm sure if I read the book again, I probably left out tons of stuff that maybe I should. But I thought, well, if anybody gets through 300 pages of this, they're a braver man than I am. So I sort of brought it to a halt.
Well, no. Where do you feel your passion for writing came from?
I don't know, but you know when you think of your life and you say, I wonder why I did that, and I think, well, I did that years ago, and maybe I forgot that I did it, enjoyed it. I started my first book, which never got anywhere, because I never even, and I did it by hand anyway. I think it was before steam typewriters were invented. But the first book I wrote was it was like a Wind in the Willows type thing, but the main guy was a badger, and he was a hedgehog, I think, I can't remember exactly, but he lived in this tree. But the trouble with my writing and ridiculous characterizations, he actually drank a lot of port and had gout. I mean, why not?
Hello.
So they do say everything's self-biographical. So at this time I'm a hedgehog. But so I wrote that, and I wrote about 50 pages of that. And I thought, that's just no good. And then, of course, when I went on the cruise ships, when I first went on there, I went on as a waiter. And I didn't want to work as a waiter anymore, because I was full of bricklayers and carpenters, and no waiters there at all. So I eventually got put up to section head waiter, which stopped me carrying all these trays.
Sure.
And we did a world cruise. So I wrote the world cruise, but as a diary.
Yeah.
Which I then had enough to turn into a book by the time I'd been 3 months at sea, which I didn't do. but I suppose I incorporated it in a book that I've written in half my life, because a lot of the time, not a lot of the time, but I've spent quite a few pages on the trip and the people I met and things like that.
Okay. In the background, I can see, and I don't know if my viewers can see, the warm wall I can see sitting there. And if they want to get it, how do they get it on Amazon and also Half My Life?
Just go on to Amazon Books, just on the website for
Garry
Amazon.
Waite, and
Yeah,
it's
going on .es.
It's a double R.
Yeah. If you go on to Amazon.es, then and you live in Spain, then you don't pay delivery, high delivery. If you order it through the UK and you live in Spain, you'll pay for it to do it. So don't do that. So just go on to Amazon.es, and if you're in the UK, go .co.uk, and you'll have to type in, because I'm not in the top 10 bestsellers, so it doesn't pop up.
Not yet. You never know what can happen. You never know what's around the corner. And talking about what's around the corner, you've been on the coast for around about 35 years. What do you think you want to do now? If somebody was to say to you, okay, Garry, you're sitting there, you're not doing anything of importance. What would your dream be now?
Well, apart from winning the lottery, so I didn't have to do anything at all.
Oh, don't be so
rather nice.
No, your brain would atrophy, and that's not going to happen.
I get such a kick out of helping set up projects with people. Okay. I just like taking a blank. Oh, it sounds naff. Taking a blank canvas and allowing me to do what I want to do. And I wrote on Facebook the other day. I dug up the menus from the Oceana Hotel and Beach Club from 2001.
Yeah, I saw that.
You saw that, and that was a very. I mean, they were in Pesetas, so that's how long ago it was. And I looked at the menu and everything. I thought, God, I remember we did that, and I remember the chef and everybody that was working there at the time. And I thought, I do miss writing the menus and talking to chefs, and I've always got on very well with most of my chefs because they know that I can do it, so they can't pull the wool over my eyes. Not normally, anyway. I've had a couple of tried, but the best ones I've worked with, like Paul Tugwell, Paul, Maurice, Jason Whitlock, a few others. They're absolutely, they're all Michelin trained chefs, but they've got no arrogance about them or anything. They're just damn good chefs, and I miss the conversations. I mean, when we did Funky Tapas with Maurice, just sitting down and deciding what sort of dishes we were going to do and how we were going to present them and everything else, which I loved, and that I miss. So if anybody's got a project, especially nowadays, Paul, my colleagues in this industry at the moment
are crying.
I just don't understand how they're going to survive, some of them.
So maybe you can put together the chefs that are not working and you're not working. Maybe you can put together something that is going to help everybody. You've got a brain, use it. And
well,
put a project together that you and the chefs can, even if it is pop-up restaurant or something like that, when we have got the chance of opening up and we don't have the situation that we're all in worldwide. But why don't you do that with your chefs until something really happens?
Well, I have a company. I have a little business called Marbella Cooking Crew, which is exactly that. It's contacting all the chefs that are not working. But the tragedy down here is that the ones that are not working have gone to other places now. I mean, Maurice is in Ireland. Jason sadly is no longer working, but he went to Dubai. Paul's still here, and he's. But we're all getting older as well, and that's another thing. And the kitchen is a young man's game at the best of time,
Yeah.
But we do, that was my intention. We also started to do outside catering, and what I did was put chefs in. I would sort the menus out and everything else with the clients, and then send the chefs down there and do it. And I just take an arrangement fee for doing it. So we've done a few of those. I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for the business at the moment. I really don't.
I don't think any of us know what the future holds for any of us, especially in the hospitality industry. And all I can say that it's a day-to-day situation.
Yeah.
Each day we
Yeah.
wake up and we say, thank you, dear Lord, that we are awake,
Yeah.
and we face it with positivity. And for me, this has been a wonderful cup of coffee with you, Garry Waite. And I'm so pleased that our lives have intertwined along the line with so many varied aspects. And I say thank you. And to my viewers, I say thank you for watching. I am sure that you have found Garry to be interesting, fun, and maybe find out things that you didn't really know about him. But he is available to start something new. So, Garry Waite, I say to you, thank you. Beso to you. And to my viewers, I say thank you so much. Take care, and I will see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.